What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. Today, I'll be taking a look at the 2024 Daytona 500 entries. I'm going to go through all the full-time entries and the part-time entries that have been confirmed for the 2024 Daytona 500. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to start to talk about the one car for Trackhouse Racing. This one's going to be driven by Ros Chastain. Now, Ros Chastain has been hit or miss in the Daytona 500 in the past, but Ros Chastain is a very solid super speedway racer, as he does have a super speedway win in 2022 at Talladega. With how fast Trackhouse has been on super speedways over the course of the last couple of years, I think that Ros Chastain with his new sponsorship of Busch Light will help him potentially get his first Daytona 500 victory in 2024. Up next, how about the two car for Team Penske? This one's going to be driven by Austin Cindric, who signed a multi-year contract extension with Team Penske. Now, Austin Cindric, of course, won the 2022 Daytona 500, so he is a pretty solid and a really good super speedway racer. And I expect that Austin Cindric will have a really good chance and a really strong opportunity to potentially compete and get his second Daytona 500 in the last 3 years, which would be his first win since, of course, that 2022 Daytona 500. I expect it to be somewhat of a threat and contender for the win in the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the three car for Richard Childress Racing? This one's going to be driven by Austin Dillon. Austin Dillon is a former Daytona 500 winner back in 2018, and he's been pretty good at super speedways for pretty much a majority of his career. In fact, I think he's one of the more underrated super speedway drivers currently in the NASCAR Cup Series. If the Chevys have really good pace and speed, I think that Austin Dillon could be an underdog and potential outside threat to win the 2024 Daytona 500. I think we'll have a really strong chance and possibility to get it done. Up next, how about the 4 car for Stewart-Haas Racing? There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of the number 4 car, as Kevin Harvick, of course, is retiring and joining the Fox Sports booth. His replacement is going to be Josh Berry, who will be running in his first Daytona 500 this year. Josh Berry is a really okay super speedway racer. He's not been amazing, but he has gotten better on super speedways with Junior Motorsports over the course of the last couple seasons. I think he's an underdog considering how fast Ford has been on super speedways throughout their history. I wouldn't put him as a big threat, but I think that Josh Berry could be somewhat of an underdog in this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 5 car for Hemric Motorsports? This one's going to be driven by Kyle Larson. Kyle Larson is not the greatest super speedway racer in the world, but to be fair, since getting to Hemric Motorsports, I feel like the Kyle Larson has actually gotten a lot better. He's been up front a lot more, has led laps in the Daytona 500, and nearly won the 500 last year. I think Kyle Larson has a really solid chance and a potential opportunity to potentially get his first Daytona 500, which if he's able to win the Daytona 500 in the 500 in the same year, he'd be the first driver to do that, I believe, in the same season. Up next, how about the 6 car for RFK Racing? This one's going to be driven by Brad Keselowski. Now, Brad Keselowski is definitely one of the best super speedway racers in the field, but he has failed to win the Daytona 500 up to this point, and he's definitely running out of time to get that Daytona 500 victory. But I think Brad Keselowski is going to be one of the favorites. RFK Racing is going to have a really strong team this year in 2024. He's came very close to winning and had probably one of the best cars in last year's Daytona 500. I expect Brad Keselowski to be a really solid threat and a really solid contender to potentially pick up his first Daytona 500 victory in the 2024 season. Up next, how about the 7 car for Spire Motorsports? This one's going to be driven by Cory Joy. Cory Joy is definitely one of the more underrated super speedway racers in the Cup Series field currently at the moment. He's always a solid threat for wins, and a lot of his top 5s and top 10s have come at this point as super speedways. I expect Spire Motorsports to have a really strong super speedway program in the 2024 season, and maybe, just maybe, Cory Joy could lead Spire Motorsports to their first win as an organization and in the Cup Series, and potentially his first career win in 2024. Up next, how about the 8 car for Richard Childress Racing? This one's going to be driven by Kyle Busch. Now, this will be Kyle Busch's, I believe, 19th Daytona 500 entry, and he has still not won the Daytona 500 up to this point. He came very close to winning the Daytona 500 last year in 2023 and led at the 200th lap. I think Kyle Busch has got to be one of the favorites going to this year's Daytona 500, considering how strong the RCR Super Speedway program has been over the course of the last couple of seasons. And I think Kyle Busch has a really strong chance and a very good opportunity to win this year's Daytona 500 in 2024. Up next, how about the 9 car for Hemric Motorsports? This one's going to be driven by Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott is a pretty good super speedway racer and is always up front in a lot of super speedway races. And he's been close to winning Daytona 500s in the past, including in 2021, where I believe he finished runner-up to Michael McDowell. I think Chase Elliott does have a really solid and a really good chance to potentially pick up his first Daytona 500 victory in the 2024 season and potentially get his first Cup Series win in nearly a year and a half. His last one coming at Talladega in 2022. He's won a lot of super speed races also with this current next-gen car. Up next, how about the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing? There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of the number 10 car in 2024 for the Daytona 500, as Eric Almirola will be going to Joe Gibbs Racing NASCAR Xfinity Series for a majority of the season. His replacement is going to be Noah Gragson. Noah Gragson is a pretty good super speedway racer in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and he's getting a second chance with Stewart-Haas Racing in 2024. I expect Noah Gragson, with how fast Stewart-Haas Racing has been, to maybe have an outside chance to potentially get his first Daytona 500 victory. Maybe Noah can carry that number 10 car to victory lane in this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 11 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This once again be driven by Denny Hamlin. Now, there have been some talk and chatter that Denny Hamlin could miss the Daytona 500 in the early portion of the offseason due to shoulder surgery. But Denny Hamlin has cleared himself and he's ready to go for this year's Daytona 500. Denny Hamlin, of course, a three-time Daytona 500 winner, is looking to become only the third driver to have at least 4 Daytona 500 victories. With him already winning the Busch Light Clash earlier this past week, I think Denny Hamlin has a really solid chance and a good opportunity to potentially win his fourth Daytona 500 this season. Up next, how about the 12th car, 13 Penske? This one's going to be driven by Ryan Blaney. Ryan Blaney, of course, coming in here as the defending NASCAR Cup Series champion, but is looking for his first Daytona 500 victory. And Ryan Blaney has been really solid and really good in the Daytona 500 over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. He almost won in 2018, had the fastest car, nearly won it in 2020 in a photo finish, and also nearly won it a couple years ago in 2022. I expect Ryan Blaney to have really strong speed. He's a really good super speed racer and won the most super speed race at Talladega last year. I expect Ryan Blaney to have a solid chance and opportunity of winning the Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 14 car for Stewart-Haas Racing? This once again be driven by Chase Briscoe. Now, Chase Briscoe, I believe, led the most laps in last year's race at Daytona, the summer race that decided who got into the playoffs. And Chase Briscoe has been solid and decent at super speedway tracks throughout his career. I don't expect him to be a major threat and contender for the Daytona 500 victory, but I think of how fast Stewart-Haas Racing has been, maybe he could be a sleeper pick to be a Daytona 500 winner this upcoming season. Up next, how about the 15 car for Reick Racing? It was announced about a week or two ago that Riley Herz will drive the number 15 car for Reick Racing in the Daytona 500 and a couple of the races throughout the season, and will have Monster Energy as a sponsor. Riley Herz is a pretty solid super speed racer. He's got really good last year in 2023 and nearly won the pole for the Daytona race in August or September. I expect Riley Herz to have an outside chance. He's matured as a race car driver, and I think he could have a pretty good year with this team in the 2024 season in select races and also in Xfinity as well. Up next, how about the 16 car for Gaulig Racing? This will be driven by AJ Allmendinger, who will make his first start this year if Gaulig Racing, because remember, he'll be full-time in Xfinity with Gaulig Racing this season. I expect AJ to have a decent chance because Gaulig Racing, while their Xfinity program has been good for super speedways, I think their Cup program also will be pretty solid and pretty good this year as well. I expect it to have pretty good speed. I expect it to be an outside contender and an outside threat throughout the 2024 Daytona 500, and I think he could lead Gaulig Racing to their first Daytona 500 victory in 2024. Up next, how about the 17 car for RFK Racing? This will be once again driven by Chris Buescher. Now, Chris Buescher, of course, is the defending winner at Daytona National Speedway as he won the race in August in 2023. We know how strong RFK Racing's super speedway program has been over the course of the last couple seasons. I think that Chris Buescher will be really good this year. He's won a Daytona once before, and he could potentially get his first Daytona 500 victory with the team this year at RFK. He looks to get his first Daytona 500 victory in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, how about the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This once again be driven by Martin Truex Jr. Now, Martin Truex Jr. is looking to win his first super speedway race and also looking to win his first Daytona 500. He's come close many times. You go back to 2016 where he was in that photo finish with Denny Hamlin, and I believe won the 2 stages in the first points-paying next-gen race here at Daytona. I think that Martin Truex Jr. has a solid chance and a decent opportunity to be really, really competitive, and I think he does if Joe Gibbs Racing can be fast on the super speedways. I think Truex could be an outside threat to get it done this season. Up next, how about the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This one's going to be driven by Christopher Bell. Now, Christopher Bell's been hit or miss at super speedways, and I don't think a lot of drivers have a lot of trust in Christopher Bell, considering the fact that Christopher Bell has caused a lot of wrecks in super speedway races up to this point in his career. He caused a wreck last time we were at Daytona. I think he does have a chance if he could be up there, but I'm worried that he may cause a big wreck in this year's Daytona 500. Hopefully he can prove me wrong and run really good this year, but honestly, I'm not expecting Christopher Bell to be a massive threat and contender in the 2024 Daytona 500 this year. Up next, how about the 21 car for the Wood Brothers? This one's going to be driven by Harrison Burton. Now, Harrison Burton has been pretty decent at super speedways. In fact, one of his only top 10s in his Cup Series career came in his debut at Talladega in the number 96 car for Gaunt Brothers Racing. And to be fair, in 2022, he had one of the fastest cars in the Daytona 500. If Harrison Burton could hook up with the Team Penske cars, I think he could lead himself to potentially getting his first ever Cup Series win and potentially getting his first ever Daytona 500 victory in his career. I think he's got an outside shot, and he could be an outside threat to win this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 22 car for Team Penske? This one's going to be driven by Joey Logano. Joey Logano, of course, won the 2015 Daytona 500, and also Joey Logano has historically been really solid and really good at super speedways in his NASCAR Cup Series career, winning many races at Talladega up to this point. But I believe his only points-paying win at Daytona has been that Daytona 500. Now, he's been also unlucky for sure throughout his career up to this point at Daytona, but I do think that Joey Logano does have a decent shot to be at least a little bit competitive. We'll see what Joey Logano can do, but if Team Penske can hook up together, he might have a chance to get his second Daytona 500 victory and his first one since 2015. Up next, how about the 23 car for 2311 Racing? This one's going to be driven by Bubba Walls. Now, Bubba Walls doesn't have the track record in the next-gen era with the finishes, but he's been one of the best super speed racers in the field over the course of the last couple of years, and he's one of the current favorites to win this year's Daytona 500, considering he did finish runner-up in this race in 2022. I think he does have a really great chance and a really strong possibility if 2311 and Toyota can work together very well this season. I think Bubba Walls could potentially, if he's fast enough, I think he could potentially get his first Daytona 500 victory in 2024 and what would be his third career victory as well. Up next, how about the 24 car for Hendrick Motorsports? This one's going to be driven by William Byron. Now, William Byron historically has actually been a pretty underrated super speedway racer. He's ran up front in a lot of these races. He won his first career race in 2020 here. He also, of course, has won some races at Atlanta and nearly won at Talladega as well. I expect William Byron to have a decent shot and an opportunity to win this year if he's in contention. Hendrick Motorsports Super Speedway program has gotten better over the years, and this could potentially lead William Byron to maybe, just maybe, getting his first Daytona 500 victory in the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series season. Up next, how about the 31 car for Kaulig Racing? This will be driven by Daniel Hemric this season, who of course will be replacing Justin Haley, who will join Reick Racing in 2024. Daniel Hemric is a okay super speed racer, and he does have a top 15 finish. This will be his third Daytona 500 attempt, and he'll be looking to win his first Daytona 500 this season. If Kaulig Racing can bring the pace and the speed in this year's Daytona 500, I think he's got a decent chance and a decent opportunity to be up front, potentially competing for his first Daytona 500 victory this season. Up next, how about the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports? This will once again be driven by Michael McDowell. Now, Michael McDowell, I think, is a pretty good super speedway racer and also, of course, won the Daytona 500 in 2021. I expect with the Team Penske Alliance for Michael McDowell to be up front on a very consistent basis, and maybe, just maybe, Michael McDowell could get his third career NASCAR Cup Series victory, and maybe he'll also be able to pick up his second Daytona 500 victory in the last 4 seasons. Up next, how about the 36 car for Front Row Motorsports? It was announced about a week or two ago that Casgar is going to be driving the number 36 car for Front Row Motorsports in this year's Daytona 500. Now, he's going to run 25 races with Reick Racing in 2024. I think Casgar does have an outside shot. He'll be with Front Row, a really good and strong organization. And I mentioned this to Riley Herz, but we know that 36 car has been really, really strong as well in super speed races in the past. So I think Casgar has a really good chance to make this year's Daytona 500 in 2024. Up next, how about the 38 car for Front Row Motorsports? This will once again be driven by Todd Gillan. Todd Gillan is an underrated super speed racer in my opinion. He almost won some Truck Series races at Talladega and also almost won some Truck Series races at Daytona as well with Spire Motorsports and has been up front in dual races as well. If he can survive all the carnage in the big ones, I would not count out Todd Gillan of being a threat at contender, especially with that Team Penske Alliance going into this season. I think Todd Gillan could have a chance to win this year's Daytona 500 in 2024. Up next, how about the 41 car for Stewart-Haas Racing? This one's going to be driven by Ryan Preece. Now, Ryan Preece, obviously, the last time he ran here, he had a very unfortunate flip. But if you look outside of that unfortunate flip at Daytona, which there's a reason of repaving the grass over there, Ryan Preece has been a pretty underrated super speedway racer, especially when he drove for JTG Daugherty. Has gotten some top 10s and some top 15s at super speedways, especially in Xfinity as well. And I think that Ryan Preece with Stewart-Haas Racing could have an outside shot, but I don't think he's a favorite currently going into this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 42 car for Legacy Motor Club? There'll be a new driver behind it with the number 42 car in this year's Daytona 500 as John Hunter Nemechek will be attempting to run his second Daytona 500 in his career. Now, he's been pretty good in the Truck Series, and he almost won at Talladega in 21 and also won in Atlanta in 2023. I think John Hunter Nemechek could have a chance with Toyota. I don't think he's a massive threat to get it done, but I think with Toyota and working with Ben Bayshore again, maybe, just maybe, we could see John Hunter Nemechek potentially pick up his first Daytona 500 victory in the 2024 season and get his first career Cup Series victory as well. Up next, how about the 43 car for Legacy Motor Club? This one's going to be driven by Erik Jones. Erik Jones is a really good super speedway racer and probably my top 5 or top 10 super speedway racers in the field. He's going to be a threat at contender this year, especially with Toyota. He's going to be a contender for wins. I think Legacy is going to start off a little slow at the start of the season, but I think as the year progresses, I think that you're going to see Erik Jones being a major threat at contender for wins throughout the season. I think Erik Jones has a really good opportunity to win this year's Daytona 500, as he also won at Daytona in 2018 as well. Up next, how about the 45 car for 2311 Racing? This one's going to be driven by Tyler Reddick. Now, Tyler Reddick has not been amazing and great in the Daytona 500 in the past. He's been, in fact, one of the more unlucky drivers at super speedways. So I'm probably saying he's more likely going to finish in the back half of the field of this year's Daytona 500. But I think if 2311 can work together, maybe, just maybe, he can run a lot better and prove me wrong and have a good Daytona 500 this year in 2024. Up next, how about the 47 car for JTG Daugherty Racing? This one's going to be driven by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is coming off of having a great year in 2023, including winning in the Daytona 500 last season. So he's the defending winner of the 500. I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and JTG, while they're not going to be as strong full-time this year, I think Ricky Stenhouse Jr. does have a really good chance and opportunity to potentially pick up his second Daytona 500 and go back-to-back, which would be the first driver to do that since Denny Hamlin in 2019 and 2020. Up next, how about the 48 car for Hendrick Motorsports? This one's going to be driven by Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman had a bad year in 2023, but he did win the Daytona 500 pole, and he's been really good winning Daytona 500 poles, and if I had to bet some money, he most likely will win the Daytona 500 pole once again this season. But I don't think that's going to translate to him winning the Daytona 500 in 2024. Though he could prove me wrong because he was pretty good in last year's race at Talladega, I don't know if it will translate to him, though, winning his first Daytona 500 in 2024. Up next, how about the 51 car for Reick Racing? There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of the number 51 car in 2024 as Justin Haley will be driving this car for the 500. Justin Haley, a very underrated super speedway racer, won a lot of super speedway races with Colleague in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and generally runs up front on a pretty consistent basis in super speedway races. I think he does have a chance. Ricker is going to be working with RFK. We know how strong their program has been. I think he does have a good chance and an outside opportunity to get Ricker Racing potentially their first win in the NASCAR Cup Series. Up next, how about the 54 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? This one's going to be driven by Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs has been okay at super speedways, but not absolutely amazing. He did have a really good run at the Busch Light Clash this past week, was very impressive before unfortunately got spun out by Bubba Walls and Kyle Larson. I think, though, Toyota is going to work really hard to try to get Ty Gibbs his first Cup Series win. I think he's going to win some races this year in 2024, and maybe Ty Gibbs could lead himself to potentially getting his first Daytona 500 victory this year in the 2024 season. Up next, how about the 60 car for RFK Racing? RFK is going to be entering the 60 car as the Stage 60 program, and David Ragan, who's an experienced super speedway racer, will be behind the wheel of the seat. David Ragan, of course, will have to make it on speed this year, but with how fast RFK has been, I think that David Ragan will easily be able to make it in on pace and speed on Wednesday evening. We know that David Ragan has also won a Daytona back in 2011 and also won a Talladega in 2013. I think David Ragan has a really good chance to make the field and also has a good chance and outside opportunity to win the Daytona 500 this season. Up next, how about the 62 car for Spire Motorsports? This year, this car will be driven by Anthony Alfredo, who of course will be driving full-time for Our Motorsports in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Anthony Alfredo, of course, will make a couple starts with his team, including in the 500 and also at the first Talladega race. I think that Anthony Alfredo will be a solid threat and contender to potentially getting his first Daytona 500 win, because we know how fast Spire Motorsports has been in the Daytona 500 in the past, and maybe we'll see Anthony Alfredo with that Death Wish coffee also be able to make the field this season as well. Up next, how about the 71 car for Trackhouse Racing / Spire Motorsports? This will be driven by Zane Smith, who will be attempting to run his second Daytona 500. Zane Smith has won a couple Truck Series races at Daytona with Spire Motorsports back in the 2022 and 2023 season. So he's a pretty good super speed racer in trucks. He's been okay in Cup. He did attempt the 500, I think, last year and was able to make the show. I think Zane Smith could be a serious threat, especially with Spire, how much better I think they're going to get this year. I think he could have an outside chance to win his first ever Daytona 500 in 2024. Up next, how about the 77 car for Spire Motorsports? There'll be a new driver behind the wheel of the number 77 car in 2024, as Carson Osbar will replace Ty Dillon, who will be going down the Truck Series full-time this season. Carson Osbar is very aggressive, so I think that could really help him. But with Spire Motorsports, like I mentioned with Zane, I think he has an outside chance to win the Daytona 500 with that aggression. I think the 77 car will be fast and will be solid and will be a decent threat, but not a massive threat, to win this year's Daytona 500. Up next, how about the 78 car for Live Fast Motorsports? This will be driven by BJ McLeod. This car is only going to run a select number of races in 2024. I don't expect BJ McLeod to be a major threat and contender. I think he's the most likely to go home as a go-or-go-homer, but we've seen a lot of crazy stuff in the Daytona 500 in the past. I think if BJ makes the field, he could be a decent threat, but honestly, I don't expect this car to be up the pace and up the speed if he is able to make the Daytona 500. No offense or no disrespect to BJ McLeod. Up next, how about the 84 car for Legacy Motor Club? This will once again be driven by Jimmy Johnson, who will be running his second straight Daytona 500 and will be looking to win his third Daytona 500 in 2024. Now, I think Jimmy Johnson has a better chance this year. He's going to have Earl Barbin this year, which we found out over the weekend on Friday, and I think that really could help Jimmy Johnson this time around. He's been unlucky at super speedways, but he was pretty decent at Daytona last year. I think Jimmy Johnson will have a decent chance and opportunity to make the field and win the 500 this season. And finally, let's talk about the 99 car for Trackhouse Racing. This will be driven by Daniel Suarez once again. Now, Daniel Suarez is on the hot seat going into the season because he could lose his ride if he does not have a great season. He's been okay at super speedway races in the past, but has not been absolutely amazing. So maybe, just maybe, though, he can turn the corner and turn things around and start the year off well. He did win the NASCAR Mexico race over the week at the Busch Light Clash, so maybe Daniel Suarez can use that experience to potentially get his first Daytona 500 victory in 2024. So, that is the 2024 Daytona 500 entry list. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and Spire page as well. List description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Who's your pick to win the Daytona 500? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. More than likely, my picks video will come out next week. I got a lot of great content dropping in the channel over the course of the next couple weeks as we get closer to the Daytona 500. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.